Hello, everyone, and welcome to today's special interview segment. I'm so honored to have today Dr. Irvin Scott, who's a distinguished figure in the realm of educational leadership. He joined the faculty of Harvard Graduate School of Education in 2016, where he's working with both the school leadership program and the Doctor of Education leadership program. I know that he's extremely enthusiastic and a leader in the field when addressing those programs. Prior to joining Harvard, Dr. Scott also worked at the Bill and Melinda Gates Foundation as the Deputy Director for K-12 Education. He has an extensive leadership career in school districts and schools as well. So thank you, Irvin, for joining us today.
Excited about being here, Byron. Thank you for the opportunity.
Great. So, Irvin, can you tell the audience a little bit more about yourself and your background?
Probably 3 years in education. I started as a high school English teacher, which was probably the job that I've enjoyed the most in my 30 plus years. High school English teacher, ran a nonprofit, was a high school principal, was a district leader in Boston, overseeing the high schools in Boston before becoming the chief academic officer in Boston, and then going to the Bill and Melinda Gates Foundation to do national level work around K-12 education reform during the 2000, that'd have been 11 to 16. So anyone who knows education well knows those were some pretty pivotal years of education reform across the U.S. And that's when I was at the Gates Foundation. So yeah, that's sort of a real quick overview. And I've just been at the Graduate School of Education for the past 8 years, training leaders, doctoral students, master's students who want to lead in education.
That's great. I really love your background, and one of the things I think when we spoke before this conversation was we have a lot of common colleagues, right, that have gone through your training and have heard great things about the program in general. So I'm really thrilled to have you joining us for this conversation. One of the things when we were kind of planning this conversation, we talked about is a little bit about the connection between the work that you've been doing and the 7C survey that Tripod facilitates with schools around the country. So would love to hear your opinion on teacher effectiveness and the role of student perception surveys and helping to really get a broader picture of teacher effectiveness in the classroom from the perspective of students.
Yeah, I probably come at this in sort of three ways. One, having been a teacher, 11 years, high school English teacher, always striving daily to be effective. Of course, the question of what does effective mean is an important question related to the surveys, which we'll talk about here in a second. Mm-hmm. So I come at it as a former teacher. I come at it as a former leader of teachers, principal, district leader, who was then in a position of trying to establish systems that help and enable teachers to be effective, whether that be sort of training systems new teachers getting into the profession, whether that's teachers that are already in the profession, making sure that they remain effective, or training principals to support teachers. So that's the second way as a leader. And then the third is as a Gates Foundation executive, focused, as I alluded to earlier, on that time of education transformation or education reform, I should say, that was so laser focused on improving educator effectiveness. In this case, teacher effectiveness, but we were also thinking about principal effectiveness in schools and school systems across the country. And so with those sort of three layers of sort of personal teacher, leader, and then foundation executive, it's more at the foundation executive role where I I think we were trying to understand, well, I know we were trying to understand what do we mean by effective? And more importantly, how do you determine who is effective? What are the ways of measuring effectiveness? And so it's in those set of questions that anyone who knows the measures of effective teaching study led by Tom Kane, my colleague at Harvard Graduate School of Education, knows that was the heart of that study, that project. How do you measure the effectiveness of teachers? And I think one of the big takeaways, which still resonates with me and hopefully people who understand the work of teaching and the complexity of teaching, it would resonate with you, that you have to do it. There are multiple ways of measuring, or there are multiple indicators, or there are multiple measures for determining the effectiveness of teachers. And it's the sort of triangulation of all of those indicators that will ultimately lead to a better understanding of who's effective, who's not effective. And one of those indicators is hearing back from students, which just makes sense. I mean, go back to my first personal example of the teacher. One of the things that I did every year was I gave a student survey, but it wasn't a student survey. I don't know, maybe that was innovative back in 2008, 2009. When did I start? I'm sorry. No, I began in 1989, so much earlier than that. I just gave the students a piece of paper at the end of the year. I still have them, as a matter of fact. And I said, tell me how class went. And inevitably they would comment just not only the class, but on me. And so I don't think this idea of hearing back from students as a measure of the effectiveness of teacher is a sort of brand new innovative idea, even when Tripod was doing it. What was innovative about it was it became one of the critical measures of the multiple measures. And then, of course, Tripod systematized it through the 7 C's and through a tool that could be mass produced and used and was psychometrically sound and all that good stuff. That was all innovative. But this notion of hearing back from students as one indication of whether a teacher is doing his or her job, or whether they're good or not, or whether they're having an impact, I think that's probably been around for as long as teaching has been around.
Yeah, absolutely. I've similar experience of when I was in the classroom of exactly what you described, of almost like an exit ticket, after a lesson. How did it go? Give me feedback on it. Maybe not every day, but certainly after those pivotal moments. And I remember getting feedback that, sometimes it was great. Sometimes it was, really telling me how I could improve. And I don't think as a teacher, I could have really operated without that. It seemed like such a critical part of what I was doing, is because I'm not in their position. I'm teaching, so I can see a lot, but getting the perspective of the students. The other thing that resonates of the things you just said is it's one of those measures, one of the critical measures, in addition to all of the other sort of operational and experience touch points with your classroom, your attendance, your grades, your test scores, parent input, all those other things that are happening in your classroom. So totally agree with that. And remember fondly all the we were using Post-it notes, really, kind of like, handing those out and have them stick it up on the board and collect them. And things are a little bit more sophisticated now in 2023. We're using platforms to collect a lot of this information, which can make it easier, but the premise is really similar. So definitely resonates with me. One of the other things that you're mentioning that I'd love to follow up on too and get your perspective on is, some of the scalability of the efforts now that we can, maybe expand some of these efforts with more schools, with more classrooms. And I'm wondering, from your view, with kind of a global view of education, what are some of those other scalable efforts that schools are taking that you find really interesting right now? I mean, especially as it relates to teacher effectiveness or classroom experience, are there any other things that you've heard about or seen recently that scale across multiple schools and districts?
Well, I can definitely say there are other things that I hope scale uh, and are scaling to a certain degree. And I think some of this, at least this one, goes back to my Gates Foundation days. And it's a critical lever in improving educational outcomes for kids. And that is curricular materials. I would describe them as, at least the ones that I hope scale, culturally responsive curriculum materials that are tied to some measurement of their alignment to high standards for kids. I think those are critical things to scale, and to a certain degree, they are scaling some with the support of foundations like the Gates Foundation, Schusterman Foundation, and this has been happening for some time now. I think another thing that is even more sort of hot topic, or sort of in the current milieu of what's going on in schools and schooling, and I think is helpful, is the idea of sort of deeper partnerships between workforce and schools, particularly secondary schools or high schools, where students are getting the opportunity to understand more clearly how their learning applies to a career. And I see more efforts, for example, with what's happening in Washington, D.C., in certain neighborhoods where they're bringing in industry, sort of high-tech industry, programming, and names like Google and Microsoft and others in partnership with schools, so that students, and this is sort of a new career and tech way of thinking, so that students can see the through line between their learning and application and careers. I think more and more that those kinds of experiences, whether it's in the healthcare career or technology career, STEM, mostly, I think more and more that kind of those kind of partnerships and that kind of work is critical for children and what we're ultimately trying to prepare them for.
Absolutely.
Those are two real quick examples.
Yeah, no, I appreciate that, and connecting to concrete next steps in career, also those careers that we know are expanding, where the opportunities will be for this current generation of students is extremely important. And also thinking about the future, one of the things that comes to mind as we try to bring some of these topics together is kind of how we see things developing over time, and particularly going back to instruments like the 7C survey. I wonder what role you see those surveys playing in the future of educational assessment and teacher development.
Well, I think they should continue to play a critical role. What I have to be honest about is I don't know. It's been a while since I've been really, really close to the multiple measures that school districts are using to determine effectiveness. Full disclosure, my perception is that there was a backlash that came as a result of some of the education reform that was tied to teacher effectiveness. The Obama administration, which Arnie Duncan, these are names and ways of knowing the work that could trigger for people sort of the response that happened out there in schools and school districts, and where people then began to try to tie teacher effectiveness to salaries and rejiggering step and lane, salary compensation systems. To be really honest, I felt that was positive work, and it's still important work. Building career ladders, differentiating the role of teaching, all of that is important. But I think in some ways there was some pushback. My point being, I'm not sure to what degree the tripod survey and the use of it got caught up in that and then caused people to not be as responsive. But I think, and this is probably a way that we could have done better, because I consider myself a part of that group who was pushing those reforms. I think the more we see these types of tools, tripod and other multiple measures, as tools for development as opposed to tools simply for evaluation, I do think there is some role that evaluation should play even in development. But primarily what we're trying to figure out is, where are you on a trajectory of effectiveness? Not so that we can get you, but so that we can support you. And so to the extent that tripod and any other mechanism for determining effectiveness is seen more as a tool to develop, train, support teachers, I think the more likely they are to really be sustained in schools and school systems.
Absolutely. Well, thank you so much for your thoughtful responses. I wanted to wrap up with a question. Just what are some things that you're excited about, that you're working on, and what's next for you, Irvin?
Yeah, no, I appreciate the conversation. I think, I continue to enjoy training the next generation of leaders for schools, school districts, for systems, for nonprofits across the country. So really enjoy that work here at Harvard Graduate School of Education, as well as working directly with school systems and other training organizations. So that's one. I continue to be very interested in the intersection of faith and education. I think there are ways that we could engage faith organizations more deliberately, especially those that are proximate to the schools where so many of our children are. And so I'm very interested in that kind of work, and spearhead an effort called the Leadership Initiative for Faith and Education here at Harvard. And also I recently finished up a book that will be coming out April 9th, 2024. The title is Leading with Heart and Soul, 30 Lessons of Faith, Learning, and Leadership for Educators. And so that's something that I'm really looking forward to in 2024.
Awesome, and congratulations on the book. So grateful for your time today, and thanks so much.